Thanks, Cam. That was amazing. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. Thank you so much for coming this evening. I've had a bit of a life-changing week in New York, and I do these shows a lot in London, but this is kind of another level. So thank you, WNYC, for having me in this green space, amazingly organised setup. So I'm going to do my little intro and also introduce Aminatou so now, because it's a bit embarrassing when someone's just sat there and you're telling them how amazing they are. But she can hear backstage, it's fine. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my show. So 3 years ago, I wrote a book called Ctrl Alt Delete, decided that writing about yourself is really narcissistic, and I never wanted to do it again. So I was like, what can I do to kind of take that away from me and just interview other people and just like stop talking? So I turned it into a podcast, very much a side hustle, and then 3 years later, here I am and doing these amazing shows with incredible guests. So thank you so much for coming out tonight. So I talk a lot about multi-hyphenate working and how we all do a lot now, and the traditional job is massively changing. And when I thought of a guest, and the amazing team here, and Clemmy, thank you, we were thinking who to interview, because this is a podcast. We want to talk about the way the world is changing. I want to talk a bit about feminism and social media and creativity and just kind of get a bit inspired. So I couldn't think of a better person than Aminatou, co-host of Call Your Girlfriend, one of my favorite podcasts ever. I literally recognized her voice by her saying like thanks over there. Such an iconic person. So I'm going to introduce her in now, like a chat show. Come in. Woo! Woo! Good. So, have you noticed I've picked Robin?
You know, this is a good Robin song. She's on tour, so
I thought you'd be angry if I picked Call Your Girlfriend, because she'd be like, you're not doing our podcast. Like, we do our podcast.
You know, it's okay. The song belongs to everybody, so it's fine. It's fine.
Even though we had to use a strange remix so we wouldn't get sued. But anyway, so talking of multi-hyphen vibes, so you're a strategist, you're a writer, you're a podcast host, you're everything. You're an icon to many.
Listen,
you're my personal hero. I could go on.
I just have a lot of bills to pay, so I have to do that however it works out for me.
But you enjoyed working that way?
I do. You know, it's been, it's interesting. I, working freelance and then working for myself and then incorporating my own business it's been such a journey where I never thought this is where it would take me, but it feels really rewarding to be able to make a living doing all the weird stuff I want to do and being driven by my own curiosity. So I am really thankful for that.
I'm going to ask you some questions about that as well, because the recent episode of Boss Ladies, I think it is, on Call Your Girlfriend.
Yes.
You guys are really honest, and I think a lot of people swerve around things, but you spoke numbers, like you really shared a lot, so it was really good.
I mean, I think that a value that we have in our business, like the business of Call Your Girlfriend, which is run by me and Ann Friedman and Gina Delvac, is like transparency is really key, because we're not doing anything new. People are talking about all the things that we talk about, people are talking about. We are not reinventing the wheel here. Women's issues, a new thing. But I think that a thing that has always been really frustrating to me, and it's frustrating to a lot of people, is that nobody ever wants to talk in specifics. And so if you don't really get specific, then there's nothing that we can, there's not really a stick that you can measure by. You don't know if progress is happening. But also it's exhausting. It is exhausting to feel that everybody is comparing themselves to each other, but you don't actually know what it is that you're comparing. And, and I think that like part of running a business as women is that we have been really lucky that some people have been transparent with us and has helped us grow our venture. And so I think that even giving that back in small parts, just it lets you see the matrix in full. Yes. And you start talking in specifics. So that's important.
It inspires other people to then talk in specifics, and it's like a movement that you start. It's like when you're at a dinner party and one person is open and shares, and says a secret or a thing they're embarrassed about, it's like a domino effect and everyone starts sharing.
I mean, I think that especially if you think about, things that affect marginalized people, a lot of it is just shrouded in secrecy. So people will say like, oh, like I'm not getting paid my worth, or there is a gender pay gap or whatever. That's like all well and good, but I need to know what that actually means. And I think that so many people also just carry a lot of shame about things that they think other people have figured out. And the truth is that like nobody knows anything. There's just like, there are 6 competent people at all times in the world. Everybody else is faking it. And so, and I don't know, I'm a big proponent of that. I think the only thing we can give each other is information. So let's just share it.
Yes, and actually one of my questions was, because you guys discussed on your podcast recently scams. And this was when like Fire Festival, the documentaries came out and all sorts of scams were going on. Like, do you think we're in scam era, or do you think we've always been scammed?
No, I think we've always, like, scams have been around forever. I think that technology makes it so that we can talk about them together. But, I'm like, patriarchy is a scam. Whiteness is a scam. So it's just, I think that we definitely have an appetite for talking about the charlatans among us. But none of this is new. None of it is new. I think that people are doing it in different ways. And, one really good way to be a scammer is to not be specific about what you do or who you are and just talk in these very vague kind of terms. And so it's easy to see how, like an incompetent person who is enlisting Ja Rule to do a music festival can be seen as a mogul if we're not actually talking about real things, And so, I don't know. Yeah. I'm obviously fascinated by it, but I think that part of it is really that, there's so much that so many people just do not know things, and everybody lies about being an expert. This is like a thing that you will see it in your personal life. You see it at work all the time. And I'm just a big proponent of saying like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I have found that has gotten me like much further than pretending that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I remember once looking for research for my book around experts online. And I think if you type in guru to LinkedIn, you get millions of results. Like everyone's a guru.
I mean, everyone's a guru, everyone's a coach. That's my favorite thing right now. Everybody is a coach. And I was like, well, and all these people will have like tiny followings, which always makes me laugh. I was like, what can you teach me? Like you haven't done any of the things that I've done, but somehow somebody has anointed you a coach of somebody else's life. And so I don't know. It's all very mysterious and weird. Yeah. But I think you should start trusting yourself more and trusting other people less.
Totally.
So.
Well, talking of podcasting, so you started Call Your Girlfriend 5 years ago. That makes you an OG, really, 100%. Of podcasting. I feel like we're in a time where, and I'm kind of trolling myself by saying this, but everyone has a podcast, and more men than women because they have no confidence issues, clearly, by picking up a microphone and just being like, I'm interesting. And I think it's interesting how it's like breathing air now, like everyone has one. But how do you stand out then? Because you really do with yours. Like, it's not going anywhere.
I mean, sure, if you say so. So the podcast has been around 5 years. It'll be 5 years this May, which feels so long and also not long at all. If you measure it in episodes, it actually doesn't seem that long. And part of the legend of Call Your Girlfriend is the way that we all remember it, Gina Delvac, who's our producer, like made everything happen. I'm like, I don't know how you go from talking into a thing and then it becomes sound. Like, I don't understand that. And I'm not trying to understand that. That's not my area of expertise. But part of it too is that even 5 years ago, all of the people that we knew that had podcasts were like comedy bros. And I remember one of them telling me that, like women can't podcast. Like it's a thing that only like dudes can do. And I was like, well, you seem not smart. If you can do it, how hard can it be? Turns out it's not that hard. But you do have to do it fairly consistently, and we've been pretty honest too about the fact that if we had set out 5 years ago, if we had set out and said like, oh, we want to make a really popular podcast, probably that would not have gone very well for us. What we did is tell each other that we wanted to learn how to tell stories in audio, and we really just wanted to work together, which to me, like, that's still the joy of the show, is that I get to work with like 2 women that I love who are also my friends, and I love their brains, and it's the best. It's truly the best part of the day. And, and I think that the other truth is that we were just early to this medium. If we were to launch our show today, it would probably not be called Call Your Girlfriend. It would probably not be the chatty format that we have. That is not what it would be. But it's also true that when people started paying attention, after Adnan went to jail, people, we had a back catalog. And so it was just this truth of like, we were early to a medium that a lot of people, came to. That happened with blogs. That happened with, I'm sure it happened with like hieroglyphics somewhere. Like people you just like do a thing and you're consistent and you stick with it. And, we didn't monetize the show, I would say, for the first 2 years. It was just a thing that we showed up every week. We were not very good at it. It literally sounds like we were in a tin can somewhere. Like underwater.
Yeah, I look back at my first few episodes and I'm like, wow, that is a Skype call that barely made it.
I know, but the thing about it that's really cool is that I'm just like really proud that we kept doing it. It was not good. And we kept doing it. And I'm somebody who's also like very susceptible to this, like wanting everything to be perfect and everything has to be super polished or whatever. I'm really happy that I don't do, not gonna shade anybody here, like an overproduced radio show. And I think that is part of the charm and of the success of what we do. And I'm glad that it worked out.
Yeah, and it grew so organically and over time. So you work with one of your really close friends. So I wanted to ask you about that because I am in awe, actually, of how much you guys love working together and how you have a business together and you can still be friends. I've made the mistake of partnering with friends in a business context and it just like going horribly wrong. Oh. And I wondered, do you have any advice for anyone that might go into business with their friend?
Oh man, that's such a tough one. I am truly like, I love working with my friends. When I had roommates, I loved living with friends. For my own personality, I find that if I already like you and you're friends, I will be my best self. If you are a stranger, I will probably be a monster. And so that's just how I stay on the level of how I do things. So, it's just...
It's good to know.
I'm like, I'm never going to disappoint these women. I love them too much. But I do think that, like that thing that I said earlier about when we set out to do our show, we didn't set out to do a business venture. And so that was also... I think that's a story that's not everybody's story. It wasn't like we looked at each other and were like, like, let's get business married. And I think what it really was is we were like, we wanted to work together. We wanted to learn from each other's skills. And a thing that Gina always says that is true is that we were, in high school, we were the 3 people who we always did the group project for everyone. And so we found each other. So it just means that like shit will always get done. But in terms of working with your friends, I think that a place that I see it fall apart a lot is that people are just not honest about what they actually want, and you don't have it's like entering any kind of relationships. You have to define your relationship, you have to have boundaries, you have to have rules, and you need to really learn how each other work. And your work relationship is one aspect of it, and your friendship is another aspect of it, and you need to be really aware of how those two things interact. Anne and I had been friends, we had been friends for a long time. We had all these like kind of smaller collaborations. We knew how the other person worked. There, I was like, she's not gonna run away with our bank account or whatever. Like Gina, somebody who like I have only ever seen her be like at the top of her game, and so I think that's something that's very helpful. But it's also, I think that, if your feeling about like going to work with a friend is I'm not going to accomplish my goals unless I do it with these people, you are setting yourself up to fail because you're already putting too much pressure on the relationship. And also like some relationships like truly cannot handle a work component, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that, it's not going to work out. You just have to decide like what the tension and the stressor is. And I keep saying truly that like for us, it happened very organically. Like I do not know, or actually I do know, if Anne and Gina come to me and they had said, do you want to start a business with us? I would say absolutely not. Like I don't like admin. I'm afraid of the IRS. I don't want to deal with the admin part of like running a business is truly, I want to scream. And, but I think that over the years we've seen what everybody is capable of doing. It's really, a thing that's cool about working on a 3-person team is that there's always something for somebody else to pick up. Like if you're like, I don't like, I do not like to do a lot of this admin stuff, and that's usually stuff I don't get saddled with, you know?
Yeah.
And so somebody is always picking up a ball, somebody always wants to learn something, and everybody is really generous. But I think that is it's on a case-by-case basis. It's definitely like very personality-driven. And truly, like any kind of relationship, you have to be really honest about what it is that you want out of it. Because, you know, if the fear is that, like, you can't do something by yourself, and that you need other people to do it, and that your friends are conveniently there and they will help you achieve these, like, nebulous goals that you have, nobody is going to be happy.
Yes. So it's like you're both independent in your own right, doing your stuff, but you can celebrate your differences and kind of work together in that way.
Yeah.
It's so good. From listening to the show, I find that you're both very analytical, and you're both, you're not cynical, but like you'll look at something and at first you'll dissect it instead of just like getting carried away with it. And I think that's such a good thing, especially in this culture of being scammed. I think we all need a bit more of that.
I mean, everybody should be a critical thinker and a critical reader. Yeah. And I think that I see a lot of podcasts that are like this. I would say, like, our show is part of this. Any show that, like, deals with politics, like most of the gab-festy, like men save us, like, whatever thing. People really want to listen to other people to form their opinions, and that's just not who I am. Like, that is not how I learned to read. That is not a thing that makes me feel better. It's not, I just don't think that it's a good bet in general. And so, and the thing that we, we're feminists, so critical consciousness is very important to us. And I think that, like, people learning to think for themselves and having, really having an understanding of how media is made, or how opinions are formed, or how content is made, is something that, like, they should probably teach that in school. I was a marketer for a long time. I was the person who made the content. Like, I was the scammer, for a long time. So I think that that's also, like, what is going on in our show, is that Anne is a journalist. I'm somebody who has worked in media for a long time. So even back to your question of, like, earlier, like, oh, it was this organic thing. The truth is that even when our show was very small and there were 10 people listening to it, it was the 10 right people. Like, we were, we were part of an ecosystem where, like, people make things and people promote each other's things. Mm-hmm. And it's really important for me to say that because there is a professional kind of privilege that comes with a lot of that, and a lot of people just, like, don't acknowledge it. So for the people, who are like, oh, I want to start a show, like, why is it not happening? I'm like, well, like, let me tell you about how networking works, and all of this. But anyway, going back to that analytical part, I think that it's also true that, the things that young women care about are not frivolous, and women are actually, like, very strong critical thinkers. We just, that's not the narrative that the world will tell you, because we talk like this and we say like a lot, and we, like...
The amount of iTunes comments. People are like, oh, I love your show, but the likes.
I don't know. My parents paid a lot of money for me to talk like this. I, like, learned English when I was 15, 16. This is I don't know how to tell you this. This is like dog whistling to my people. So as far as I'm concerned, this is it's not an affectation, but I do, that thing that you're talking about is actually, like, really important. There's so many forces that conspire to tell women to just shut up all of the time. It's the timbre of your voice. It's how you talk. There's always, like, a thing. And I'm like, is it that women are dumb when they talk, or is it that people just don't want to listen to women, And so I think that we give a lot of space to talk about things that are on the high and low end, and just remind everyone that, like, critical thinking is, like, lit, so you should probably get into it.
Want that on a t-shirt immediately. It's so true, because I know with radio in the past, there would always be a man after the ad break, or it would always lead in with an authoritative voice, and that was always thought of as this masculine voice that didn't say like and didn't sound slightly high-pitched. And I feel like, there's a study that says, and I don't know if this is in the UK, but 13% of all podcasts are hosted by women. So it might just be that people aren't listening to it enough still, even now, which is crazy.
People are not listening to enough, but are people even listening to the ones that are there? I think that that's the thing that society should interrogate. Men say like, and please, I have it on good authority that men who do podcasts here get their like pauses and ums edited out. So that's not a, women don't have like a peculiar style of speaking that's a turnoff.
It's funny because I did a TV thing recently on the BBC that was like the first time I'd had a lot of people watching me speak, and I got so many emails from men and women, but just saying things like, well done, hardly any ums. It was like, okay, thanks, random stranger.
I mean, listen, I do think that, being on the radio and being on a podcast are completely different. If I wanted to do, like every Black person has a LinkedIn voice that they use. If I wanted to use my NPR, like best voice, go on radio, like I can do that. I am unfortunately sitting at home in a caftan, probably, like about to get high, very happy. I'm very happy with how my show is made. And so I don't need to do that thing. If that's a thing that you want, you should go for it.
I prefer that vibe.
Yeah, it's like you should go for it. But I don't know. It's like it drives me up the wall because somebody explained vocal fry to me. I was like truly explain it to me. Like, what does it sound like? Tell me. And the explanation that they gave me, I was like, yes, that sounds exactly like Ira Glass. Like, you're absolutely right. King of vocal fry. And somehow that's not part of his, that's not part of his radio journey.
So for people listening that don't know what vocal fry is, what is the definition of?
I'm telling you, listen to Ira Glass. Whatever it is that he's doing, that's what vocal fry is. I've been told. I just think it does not exist. And so, there's obviously like a lot of sexism at play with how we hear women, and that's fine. I think some of us are sidestepping it altogether and starting our own ventures and doing things. And for as many people who write in to tell me that they hate how I speak, I was like, I can't hear you over the sound of these advertising CPMs. Like, what are you saying? So, that's just not a...
I know, I think that sometimes.
It's not a...
Like, there are enough people that do like it.
Exactly.
And I think as well with the public speaking world, there's a lot of books that are coming out. I don't know if it's just in the UK, but around, there are many different types to be a public speaker. It's not just the TED Talk formula that is suited and booted with your clicker, taking a sip of water on the beat. You can be different and you can be yourself.
I mean, yeah, but that's, it's the same way that all the leadership that we praise, or the, whatever the style of like strong speaker or leader is always a white man. And it's like, that's not lost on me. But I'm also like, that's not what I'm trying to do with my life. So good luck to those people. And, like you hear it all the time. Like, is there room on the radio for, like for Black people to speak in the way that they want to speak, or other people of color, for women? And, that's not a problem that I'm trying to solve. All I know is that I have a platform where I'm doing the thing that people tell you you're not supposed to do, and it's working out just fine. So
yes. The power of podcasting for that reason as well. No one can get in your way. With the fact that you are very analytical, and you and Anne do talk a lot about things, like you look outside the box a lot, do you think that the future-proofing yourself conversation, so looking ahead, spotting the trends, is podcasting in, is journalism dying? Like all of these questions, do you think that ties into having that critical mind? Like we all need to be tapped into that a bit more?
I mean, I just feel that these are questions that people have been asking for a long time. Obviously not the podcasting thing, but hasn't media been dying for longer than I've been alive? And again, like, that's not my problem to solve. So it's truly, like, I hear you and I hear the anxiety, but these problems have been around for a long time. And I think that a lot of times also they're just excuses to not let other people at the table. And, and that's just bullshit. And so, I don't have too much anxiety about it. I love that you keep saying that we're analytical, because that is not my story of self. But I do, again, I think that it is important to say that we are feminists. Like we are people that look at the world through a different kind of lens. We are, and there are a lot of people who do this. So I think that when you think about people who have any kind of critical consciousness, again, they're people who've been interrogating the way that the world is made, right? And so I think that we're living in a moment, particularly right now, where you are seeing like every institution fail you, every white man that you thought that was like safe and like on top of his job and doing things. I'm like, no, nobody is doing anything. They're all like harassing people or just like bad at everything. And I think that for me has actually been a little, it's been a little freeing, because it means that just the ways that we are taught to trust people or to believe in a certain kind of authority and all of that, I'm like, it's just built on a model that I never fit into. And so I don't have a ton of, I just don't have a lot of anxiety about it. I'm a Black woman. A lot of people told me that I would not be anything. I was like, well, that's, there's a part of it that's like, well, like that really sucks. And then there's another part of it that's like, oh yeah, great. Like I can have a different kind of imagination for what my life and my world can be. And, I think that if you are somebody who is playing the long game, betting on yourself is like, that's probably what you should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Backstage, it was interesting though that we were really excited about tonight, and there's a level of this is going to be great and we can't wait, but we were both talking a little bit about imposter syndrome, and it's such an interesting one because you can feel both those things. You can feel empowered doing your own thing and fully confident in what you're saying, but on the flip side, is it always there lurking?
I mean, my feelings about imposter syndrome are it's a little wild, but hang in there with me. I think that a little bit of imposter syndrome is actually very good for you, especially for young people. Like, young people are fucking idiots. Like, you should just know that. You should know that, like, you don't know anything. You're probably going to break things. There is no reason for somebody to trust you when you're 25. You're literally an idiot. And you need to be humble to that. Just because we live in this culture that tells everybody that you're supposed to be a 30 under 30, like a 5 under 5 or whatever. And it's like, no, you truly know nothing. You know zero things, and nobody should trust you. And, but I do think that imposter syndrome also should not paralyze you. And there is also a very racialized lens through which we talk about imposter syndrome. When I say that I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, it's that thing. I'm like, I want to do the best that I can do. And also I think that it's like good to question your place all of the time whenever you are doing things that are public facing a lot. It's like, how much, like, am I the right person to say this? Should I do this? Is it a thing that is like worth talking about? I think that if you're some sort of public person and you don't ask yourself that every day, you're probably some sort of monster. So I think
someone without it is slightly dead behind the eyes.
So I think that that's good, but I also think that, there is just a way also that a lot of women talk in this very self-deprecating way about, like, they're imposters and never going to accomplish anything or whatever. I'm like, that's not me. Like, I'm on a rocket ship. And, and there's a lot of studies actually that bear this out. When you look at, I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, like studies about like ambition by race. It's like, I think the study was like going to a corporation and asking people like, who here is ambitious? Like, i.e., who wants to be a manager, who wants to do more? Do you think you can do it? White women are always like, I don't know, like imposter syndrome. And Black women are like, yes, please, like I want to do this. And so I think that it's like worth like remembering that the obstacles are different, even if sometimes the feeling is the same. Mm-hmm. And I think that particularly for people of color and especially for Black people, part of the imposter syndrome is truly because the people are telling you that you don't belong here, or there's never been a model for the thing that you are trying to do. Whereas I would say that presents differently for women who are white, for example, and for all sorts of minorities. And so I think that it's just, when we talk about imposter syndrome, we're not always talking about the same thing. And but also at the same time, like, look at who is president. Like, that has cured my imposter syndrome. I'm like, this, if the people who are running the country, if they can do that, the small goals that I have, I'm pretty sure I can accomplish them. Like, it's fun. So it's good to have some perspective in life also, and just not be paralyzed by the things that you can't do.
Yes, 100%. But exactly that.
Those are my wild thoughts about imposter syndrome.
No, I totally agree. And also, I know Michelle Obama, when she went on that tour, like the one headline that just seemed to keep coming back up was that she has imposter syndrome. And well, that's exactly what you were just saying. That whole conversation of maybe there's a little bit of it being good, but also it's interesting that someone as powerful as her still feels that way.
I know, but don't you feel that in your own life that it's very weird that you get to have this job or like talk to, you know what I mean? Like,
I think it gets worse as you get more successful because
like,
there's more to be an imposter about.
Right. So it's probably good that we think about, you know, I was like, people used to just work in factories alone. Like, that's all people did. We get to not do that. So
I think about that all the time. I think about that. I feel that this kind of busy culture of like, oh, I've got so much on and like there's so much labor to do. And it's, if you think of the people before you who actually like dug things into the ground or spent hours making things, we've got it pretty good.
Right. Like, I don't know what I would have done. Like, I not be a good coal miner, would not be a good, like, whatever, you know. Yeah. Also, like, Black people, we can't play the time machine game because it gets bleak very fast. But all of that, I'm just like, I just don't know what else I would have been good at. And so I think that it's worth having a little bit of perspective sometimes. Like, we get to talk in microphones and, you know, hang out with people that we want to hang out with. Everything is going to be fine.
Exactly. Is there a conversation over here as much about the millennial snowflake thing? In the UK, a man called Piers Morgan, shout out if you're watching, he thinks that, you know, millennials are like very, very fragile and we cannot do anything and everything's so much hard work. But I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that.
I mean, first of all, America invented the millennial snowflake trend.
Okay, right.
And you people send us your worst people here to do media work, and Piers Morgan is one of them.
I'm so sorry.
So just every time they come over, you're like, why are they sending them here? But, you know, he doesn't go here, and he has a lot to say about our politics. But anyway, that's its own thing. I have Piers Morgan feelings.
That's a whole other podcast.
But, you know, I think that the millennial snowflake thing is... This really wonderful writer at BuzzFeed, actually, Anne Helen Peterson, wrote this great piece about millennial burnout recently that I would encourage everybody to read. And, you know, and I love so much that she put it in context. Like, it's not new for older people to tell younger people that they're lazy or whatever, you know, like, that's fine. That's not a thing that rattles me, but I do get very upset when, you know, it's not from a place of actual intellectual honesty, right? So is it that, like, millennials are snowflakes, or is it that we were thrown into the fire of the worst economy this country has had in a long time that, you know, I'm sure, you know, I hear you people have your own problems over there. And, you know, is it that, or that we were also sold this bill of goods of the fact that we had to work, if we worked really hard, everything would pan out. And so when I look at my friends here who work incredibly hard, are saddled with so much student debt that, you know, it almost doesn't matter how hard they work, that we are living in this like super uncertain political time. The economy is like about to be in shambles at any moment again. And, you know, the dream of home ownership is literally just that, like a dream. And we're people who were bamboozled by our parents and by society at large, and that's not a thing that we can have an honest conversation about really, really upsets me, because you know, I would not be doing this probably if I hadn't graduated into a time where there were no jobs. Like, there was nothing to do, and I think that had like huge psychological repercussions for people. Another thing that annoys me is just the word millennial. People will be talking about millennials and I'm like, how old is that person? And they're like, they're 13. I was like, I don't need to hear this. So
also, millennials aren't young. Like, we're really old now.
Young. We're about, you know, it's like we're in Congress, we're about to be president. It's just the whole thing is here. So that stuff is fine. But I think it's just really easy, you know, to always say that like young people don't know what's going on, and not actually get to the heart of the matter of what are the actual specific things that are happening and how we can change that. It's not an awesome time, you know, to be living in the Western world. Like, things are literally falling apart.
Yes, because people do say that it's not new. Like, the generational divides are always the same. People always think young people don't know anything, and people are always a bit annoyed about outdated, old-fashioned thoughts. But I don't know if the generational divide is really strong in the workplace. It's strong because people don't quite understand where each person's coming from. I just see it a lot with older bosses who think their millennial employees are talking too much about mental health, or they're taking too many days off.
Can you imagine talking too much about mental health?
I know. It's not a bad thing at all, but
right.
It's just interesting how older people they do find that a little bit full on sometimes.
I mean, I think that part of it is honestly that we are the first generation that our bosses don't know how to do our jobs. And that is a thing that really stresses them out. And instead of being really honest about that, about like the world has changed and we have to do these things that I refuse to learn or be flexible about, there is just, there's a lot of friction there. When I was a people manager, I actually like the first managing jobs that I had were always managing people that were older than me. And all of the complaints that people have about millennials at work, I was like, no, this is just how people feel about anybody they have to manage. Like, everybody's an asshole. It's fine. And nobody wants to do the thing that they want to do. But, I think that we have a different kind of skill set. There is something new that is happening. We're not working at a factory, so not everything is automated. And I think that causes, like, a great amount of anxiety at work. And that said, like, I have had bosses who were amazing. I think that the generation, like, maybe it's a generational divide, maybe it's something else. I just think that having a little bit of more compassion for each other and just being honest about the things that are not working, that's probably a better way to frame this than just like, this person is young and this person is old. Like, well, yeah, that's not getting us anywhere.
Exactly. So with the mental health discussion, because I did check whether you were happy to talk about it. I mean, we're in a time of being very open about all sorts of things, but I think it's really incredible how open you are about OCD and you talk about it on Call Your Girlfriend, and you talk about all sorts of things, and you guys always open up about the highs and the lows and how you're managing things. And do you find that we are in a time where it just feels like a natural discussion now? Doesn't feel like an announcement every time someone mentions it, or there's a community there to kind of help?
Yeah, I grew up in a home where we did not really talk about mental health issues or anything like that. Like, shout out African parents doing their best everywhere. But, I didn't. I think I truly don't know. I never feel like I am announcing things when I tell people what I'm dealing with. I'm just a very verbal processor. And if I say it out loud, it just does not have the same power that it does if I keep it to myself. And so on a very purely selfish level, that's how I process. I also just think that there is no shame. There is truly no shame in needing help. I need all the help that I can get. And sometimes that is medication. Sometimes it is asking for more time off. And the reason that I don't feel shame about it is because, I'm a very productive member of society. Like, I am. Thank you to great advances in medicine. I'm also a very anxious person. I deal with depression. None of that is my fault. And so I think that also just not internalizing it is fine. And I say this to people all the time. I was like, if your neurotransmitters are broken, store-bought is fine. It's truly just like, take all of the help that you can get. And, and I think that I also know that I am in a position of privilege when I talk about this, because, who's going to fire me because I take Zoloft? Like, really? That's not I was like, like, my life is just out there in a way that I think is like, I'm actually like really happy with, because it's freeing. But I just really hope that a tiny bit of the work that I do just gives people permission to be themselves also. We talked backstage a lot about like Instagram and comparison and all these things. And that's the thing that I'm always struck by whenever I hear people talk about, like comparing themselves to XYZ or whatever, or if I hear somebody, like try to speculate about my life, I'm like, my life is a mess. Like, it's a mess and it's fine. And I just refuse to stay, to feel like I need to feel shame about things that so many people experience. It makes absolutely no sense. I think that if you are a person who struggles with mental illness and you are in a position that you can talk about it, you should absolutely talk about it, because so many people carry shame about it. And also, it just like, it helps erase the stigma. Like, we're still whenever people are running for president, it's always a huge taboo if they take any kind of drugs, right? And so, like, we've never had a president that's been, like, open about struggling with mental illness. I'm like, you have the worst job in the world. You're telling me you don't get a little bit depressed? Like, I don't believe that for 1 second. Yeah. But there's just all of these ways that we expect people to be fully put together and to present as strong all the time. And it's honestly, it's complete bullshit. And there's absolutely no shame with taking care of yourself. Is absolutely not your fault. And I think that the minute that I surrendered to that, it made my life a lot easier. And I'm like, I get to do everything I like to do, and a little bit of depression, anxiety is part of that. It's fine.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's incredible. Anytime anyone just like refuses to feel a certain way that someone's trying to put on them, it's like, no, you don't get to make me just immediately feel this way. Because it was interesting what you were saying about how these parts of ourselves and our anxiety, however that might be, does play into how we use the internet. Like, of course it does. And I remember you saying that you prefer Instagram stories because then at least you know it's disappearing. And just like all those little things, like our behaviors every single day, we need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, as the famous Japanese poet says, if it doesn't spark joy, just get rid of it. There's just, it's just interesting. I've worked in and around technology so much that I think about this all the time. Is it the technology that's making us bad? Or are we using the technology in a bad way? And I think that all of these feelings that we have are they're very human instincts. Like, people have dealt with envy and jealousy since the beginning of time. People have been anxious since the beginning of time. I just think that it is presenting in this very different way. We also, unfortunately, are up against like platforms that weaponize every single feeling that we have. And, and that's something that's like always worth remembering. It's like, a lot of these tools are built to make you have a certain kind of reaction and to make you change your behavior in ways. And so, again, it's like, you should probably read a little bit about that. And, and life is just too short. It is too short to not be yourself every single day. I don't know how people do that. So that's just how I feel.
Yeah. Knowing what you know about tech, do you think that makes it better or worse to just like go through life online? Because I remember when you were saying, the close friends function of Instagram, like, that's so nice. You can send things out to your close friends. How lovely. And actually, no, it's so Instagram can know who your close friends are so they can sell stuff to them. And I was thinking about even Uber or whatever app you might use to get around. Like, they know exactly where you are at all times. Everything isn't just a useful tool for you. It's something that they are getting a lot from. I
mean, if you're getting a technology service for free, you're definitely on the menu. Somebody is paying for it. So that's just the thing that people should know. But also, it's like some of these tools have made life easier and better. I think that it's a little too simplistic to say that all of it is bad, but all of it is having like very intensely bad consequences right now. And that's something that we should be thinking about in a way that is not on a personal responsibility way, but truly like I'm appalled that like our legislators aren't doing anything about it. And all you're left with is feeling like shit that you're not, at some sort of party that you saw on Instagram. But really, it's a little more nefarious than that. So
I know. I had a feeling this year of, oh my God, we're in this year, and people are only just cracking down on the advertising standards properly with influencers and those horrible weight loss tummy teas or whatever they are. Only now, like, how long since Instagram been around? I know it hasn't always been selling ads, but like that's coming late to it, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could talk about this forever.
Yeah. But my question is, as someone who does do some branded content in a really great way, I mean, you have to be quite careful now, don't you, to do things. I mean, you have to just be a good person.
I mean, I don't know that you have to be careful. You should probably not sell like laxative lollipops to children. That's like not a being. I I always, whenever I see celebrity do those things, I was like, do they know something about the economy that I don't know? Like, why are you selling your soul for the work? Like, why are you hoarding all this cash? Like, do I not know something? But it turns out like some people are just bad people. But yeah, I think that a level of literacy usually around advertising is like, that makes me really sad that that's not something that we teach in schools or that people realize. But there's everything around us is branded, and it's like pretty bad. So.
I loved your partnership with the water brand.
With Smart Water, I love it. I'm
the
new face of Smart Water.
I've never wanted to be more hydrated.
I mean, listen, I'm just not precious about it. I think that, I get to do brand partnerships. I do them with brands that I actually like to work with. I was like, if I spend my money on something, I'm happy to do it. It 100% like pays bills. Everybody should be so lucky to do it. But I think that I'm also not, I'm not gonna lie to you that like advertising is amazing. Absolutely not. Like advertising is bad, but we also live in capitalist society. So, I'm not the only person who can address that. So again, like coming from a place of like not everything doesn't always have to be like a personal responsibility that you have, but really thinking about like what are the systems that we have in place to actually challenge a lot of capitalism is that's something I wish that we would have a more honest conversation about.
I think that conversation is really going to come big time, because the kind of link between activism and capitalism, activists should earn money. If they're doing great work, why not partner with, I was on a panel recently, and it was a lingerie company who was doing a panel about body positivity, and I was moderating it. And one of the questions was, this isn't about body positivity if it's being paid for by this massive brand, and and how do you feel good about that? And actually someone answered, no, this is bringing the conversation to a bigger platform, and it's helping the cause, but it's such a tricky one.
I mean, I find that when people say helping the cause, we're already in a lot of trouble. I don't know. I just, again, I feel I sound like a second wave, like broken record. I'm a feminist. And, I don't believe that doing things in service of advertising is activism, or that doing things in service of a brand is feminism. I was like, activism and feminism that's politics. You're actually doing something. Now, if you want to have a personal choice to wear like fancy lingerie, God bless. I will never begrudge anybody that. It's actually like great for your self-esteem and all these other things. But I think that where people get into this really hairy positions is whenever they try to justify their choices. And feminism is not about choice. Activism is actually not about choice. It's not about wearing the lipstick that you want, or, like wearing high heels or whatever. I was like, that's a personal choice, and you should defend that on your own. But activism is politics. And I'm not saying that everybody can be so pure with their choices or whatever. What really annoys me is when people try to do the work backwards, and they just try to justify a shitty personal choice that they have. I'm like, again, like, I'm not precious about my choices. I live under capitalism. I do bad things every single day. We're drinking bottled water here. Like, it's fine. But I think that like being honest about what it is that you're doing is really important. And so, I think that I love that we live in a time that people like can shamelessly call themselves activists, because a lot of people died so that people could just like have that as a hashtag on their Instagram bio, and I think that, it's like, I can't imagine like people during civil rights, or, like the women who fought for suffrage, like thinking like, oh, one day this will be chic and in vogue. Can you believe like, it?
On a tote bag.
You'll get invited to like fancy parties for, like doing hashtag activism. But, I think that, again, to me, it is about your politics, and it is about like coming at it from a place of being honest. And a lot of times like people are not honest. I'm like, if you want to do a brand partnership and you want to call it body positivity, that's great. Body positivity is not feminism. It's not like it's I'm like, what does that mean? Words used to mean things, and words don't mean a lot of things anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, thank you for that, because I do learn a lot just from everything you say. So yeah, thank you. I have one last question, and then we're
Tell
going
me.
to open it out. So if you've got a question, now's the time to think about it. And we are live, which I forgot about, actually.
Oh my God,
we're
I
live,
forgot about
so
that.
keep it clean. Be nice to us. And this is a really cliche question. Also, I didn't ask you any of my questions, but, you know, it was great. Where do you think we are going to be in 10 years' time in the tech kind of, because, you know, people say, oh, we're going to look back and it's going to be like when people were smoking and it was so bad for us that we banned it. But where do you think it's going to be? I know that's a really big question, but what do you think we should be prepared for?
What a huge question. Did not prep for that one. You know, I'm not in the business of making predictions. It's just truly, it's not a thing that excites me. It's not a thing that I think I can win at. And again, I don't think that any of these, like, none of this is new. I was watching this incredible clip where Prince at some award in like the early 90s was talking about how bad the internet would be one day. I'm like, this is amazing. Thank you. You know, I think the place that I hope that we get to, which is not a prediction as much as it is a hope, is that I hope that we can take the internet back from the platforms that own it. And I hope that we can teach this new crop of young people who are coming up to be more discerning about what it is that they're signing up for. And I hope that we can also get to a point where the people who represent us at like every echelon of politics actually understand how technology works. It really depresses me that they're, you know, they're still trying to figure out how to like attach pictures to emails, and the rest of us are like getting eaten by robots. And I'm just ready to not have idiots like questioning people all the time and making these regulations.
Yes,
So, yeah.
yes. Thank you.
So that's a terrible answer.
No,
but
that
yeah.
was such a good response. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
So does
you.
anyone have any questions? Anything that I've missed off? Anything just like, where are your shoes from? No, I'm joking. Anything?
We're not doing advertising on
no,
this.
we're not. We made that one clear. There's a mic there. Thank you.
Thank you both. I wanted to ask about shine theory and how you and Anne came up with that as a concept and how that whole notion evolved.
How we came up with shine theory. Shine theory is it's the operating principle of my friendship with Anne. It's also an amazing lyric from The Killers, a band you might remember. Where we would always tell each other, especially when we were becoming new friends, like, I don't shine if you don't shine. And it was really a way of reinforcing for each other that we supported each other and that we would be there to really to help each other in all of the ways that we needed. And so the idea of it really is that you know, society pushes so many messages to you about how catty women are and how competitive we are. And like, truly, it has not been a thing in my life that I believe was gendered. I was like, people are competitive in general, but it's very convenient to say that young women who want things are catty. And the thing that was also like true both in my friendship with Anne and a lot of my friendships in my early 20s were that the women that I knew were the most supportive people in the world. And so it was interesting that you would watch a movie and like women are fighting, and then you actually go to work, and even women that you don't love actually like can help you do things. And so I think that it truly for us just became a shorthand about creating a horizontal kind of loyalty and creating a peer group that you work with. So it's not networking. It's not saying like, oh, I'm choosing my friends because they're going to be successful or whatever. It is saying like, this is the cohort that I'm in, and I will do my best to help everyone to the best of my ability, like achieve all of their goals. And also realizing that, you know, that it's like when you look at the way that the pie is structured, they tell you it's always like there's only like a tiny sliver for, it's like woman goes right here, person of color goes right here. And that's the actual scam of heteropatriarchy. They're like, we get everything else and you're like a Highlander. It can only be one of you. So you guys have to duke it all out. And that's such a reductive way of thinking. And, you know, and I have found in my career and in my life that when, instead of coming from a place of scarcity, I come from a place of abundance where I'm like, I don't have to be the only like XYZ here. that there's so much more opportunity and that there are so many people that I'm surrounded with that will help make that reality true for me.
I love that. Do you ever, and this, I sound like a terrible person here, but do you ever have to dig quite deep to feel that sometimes when you're, you know, feeling jealous of someone or feeling threatened by someone, or, you know, those natural human feelings that do crop up?
You know, honestly, this is going to sound like a very, we can't say bad words here.
We can.
It's going to sound like a, you know, like not a cool thing to say, but I, growing up, like, did not struggle a lot with envy or, you know, feeling that I wanted something that somebody had or being jealous of them. And it's not because I was some sort of virtuous person. I think that for me, it was truly like, I just didn't think I deserved anything. And so even the idea of comparing myself with someone, I was like, wow, like, what an incredible gift. That's not something that that is truly not something that I struggled with. And so, you know, and I know that that's not true for everybody, but, you know, the thing that has been the most useful for me whenever somebody has something that I want, instead of saying like, why does that person have that, is saying, how do I get that for myself? You know, and really reframing it, because comparison is just like, it's very dumb. You don't know where you're coming from. You don't quite understand how, you know, like the whole scheme of things is coming together. And also I just find that it is so much more productive to channel those feelings into learning something instead of being frustrated at people who are just doing their best to exist as well.
Yes. We need so much more of that. Anyone else got another question? Yes, at the back there. Thank you.
Hey, one thing which I find really weird when you were talking about people being really not critical but observant of your ums and your likes and your hesitations is that surely as podcasters people listen to you because there is a believability, a realness, a collection which doesn't necessarily exist if you're a CNN news reader. And I wondered, those things which we sometimes think of as negatives might be positives to people who think that's a real voice that I might have a conversation with. Given that you get such intense, kind of minute feedback, what are some of the things that people say to you about your voices? I mean, content aside, like your voices and how you speak, that they like? And are they different or are they similar?
Things that people say that they like, or?
Yeah, like about your, like literally how you deliver as podcasters, how you speak.
Yeah, well, the biggest compliment I get is, so before podcasting, I felt like everything I put out there was slightly fake, because if it's a picture, I've edited it probably a little bit. Or if it's writing, like I wrote a memoir, like that's edited, that's not on my diary. That's like some of the good bits and some of the bad bits, but like shaped. So I felt like for so long, I didn't feel very authentic actually online. Podcasting, when people say, I feel like I know you, like they do, because this is 100% me and I talk the way I talk. Like if this wasn't being recorded, I think we would have spoken in sort of the same way. It's like just a conversation. So I think that's what I really like, is people, there's absolutely no filter. And the way I've always done this podcast is I would love it if someone just felt like they were a fly on the wall and it happened to be recorded. And actually now I get into trouble with my friends because they're like, stop recording things. And actually that's a criticism of podcasts now, is like, do millennials just like sit around recording things? Yes, we do a bit maybe. But yeah, thank you. I do get a lot of negatives. People saying, oh, the one I got the other day was, hate to say this about a woman doing well for herself, but God, her voice is annoying. Cool. That's a weird backhanded compliment. What about you?
I mean, I love that person saying that to you. On our show, we always joke that, you know, we constantly talk about periods on our show. So they're literally, the men don't hang around long enough to tell us that they hate what we're talking about, because we scare them with like the blood talk at first. And it's very self-selecting. I don't know, you know, I think that thing of I really know you cuts both ways, because as much as I agree with you that the conversation is authentic, and, you know, I'm like, I speak like this with everyone. And that's true, but I think that it's also true that we edit a lot of our thoughts for radio and for the microphone. And I think that especially for me, because I do a show that it's so centered around friendship, like people definitely feel
I bet.
They feel that they know us. And what I always say is like, no, you just recognize that you have this kind of conversation with people in your life. You only know what I tell you about myself, and it's actually very edited. And so, even though people feel that it's very brave to talk about your period or talk about your weight or talk about mental health, I'm like, no, that's things that I've like resolved to give to the world. That's fine. But you don't actually know if I'm having a good day or a bad day. You don't know you don't know the ins and outs of my actual interior life. And I think that that's fine too. First of all, like, people do not pay you enough money to know everything about you. That's just true. But yeah, I always appreciate people who just hang in there with you for a long time. Like, to me, that's the best compliment that we ever get about our shows, when people come back and they will say an inside joke to us, or they will, because the show is really centered with like talking with my best friend. And so as far as I'm concerned, like, everything that we have to say is important, and everything that she says is something that I want to hear. And it always makes me, it's very heartening, and it's also very humbling to realize that like for 5 years now, like, people have just been hanging out with us, and that they take a lot of that in their own into their own spheres. And they have, I'm like, we're not doing anything new. Like, we did not invent long distance friendship. People have actually been doing it for a long time. But I think that a thing that we do is center it as a kind of relationship that is just as valid as a romantic relationship. It's just as valid as a parent-child bond. It is a way that you can really show the depth of your love with someone. And I think that, like, I know that a lot of people who listen to our show, like, that is one of the takeaways that they have, and that they feel that they can connect with the people in their lives more because we model it for them.
Yeah, and it's an engaged listenership, because you have to listen to an hour. It's not just a like, it's not just a very, you have real people who are very attached to it. And it's so nice. We've got time for a few, like maybe 2 more questions, I think. There's one at the back there. Thank you.
Hi, first of all, thank you both so much. That was super interesting. I could listen to you for another hour or 2. So I have 2 questions. One would be, what do you think about the acquisition of Gimlet and what it means for podcasting in general? And then also, do you know how many men are listening to your podcast respectively, like as a ratio? And would you want to have more men listening to your podcast?
That is actually 3 questions, which is very sneaky. I have no thoughts about the acquisition. I am very happy for my friends who work there, and I think it's cool. I don't think anything is materially changing, but maybe I don't know. It's not a thing that keeps me awake at night. It also seems like nothing is changing. Our show is, we just ran a survey, which also I love. Like, we have thousands of people respond to our surveys, which always makes me very happy because it means that it's an actual real representative sample. Thank you. Our show is like over like 90% women identifying people. So that also makes me intensely happy because it just, a lot of women podcasters talk about the sexism that they receive. We receive none because they're clearly like, they are not checking for us. I'm telling you, start with your period every time. It drives them away. And yeah, that's, I don't have a lot smart to say there to you, but good luck with the acquisition if it keeps you awake at night.
I don't know about this. I need to Google this immediately. Mine is like 80% women, 20% men, and actually I want more men to listen to it. I think that when my book came out this last year, the career book that I did, I purposefully wanted it to be not masculine in the way that it was, but just like I wanted it to be really neutral, and it's yellow, and the new cover is actually quite aggressive. And actually, when I see men at my book events, like, I'm really happy about that. I really want to be speaking to everyone. So, I'm trying to actually skew it upwards a bit.
Yeah, but can I ask you something? Do you think that it's that you are failing to attract a male listenership, or do you think that like men were just not going to listen to you anyway? Because
that's a good question, because I think it's a weird one. It's like male podcast is like just a neutral. Like, everyone listens to the podcast, like men and women. Like, it's just like there. Whereas if it's a women's podcast, does that just mean it's for women? I don't think it is.
I mean, I don't think that it's just for women. I agree with you. And I also, the reason that like a question like that, honestly, like annoys me, I think like annoy is the right word, is, you know, I'm like, none of the stats like bear this out, that men are just like, they're looking for podcasts to listen to, but there's not the right woman, you know. I was like, no, they're just not consuming, men do not consume content that is made by women. That, you know, there are many structural reasons for that. And so but that's also not a thing that keeps me awake at night. I was like, my show is not doing badly because, my God, what, you know, like if the men listen to it, my God. And that's also fine. But, you know, it's like once a week, at least, I get an email from like some dude in podcast who's like, oh my God, my girlfriend listens to you and I just discovered you. And I would like, can you tell me like other podcasts to listen to that are, and I was like, you can just Google is your friend. You can truly, you can truly look this up. There are, you know, I think that like a lot of podcast apps could do, they could do a better job at discoverability in general. Yes.
Definitely.
But I don't think that there's any amount of AI or tech or, you know, like you changing the colors of your book or any of that stuff that's going to change that. I think 100%. That, you know, I would say that somebody like you, you are probably the best ambassador for like the women podcast that you listen to. And so, you know, I hope that you're telling people about them if they're good.
Totally. And actually, there's a lot to unpick there. Like you were saying, you know, how embedded is the patriarchy in the sense of like, why do I feel happy when a grown man likes my book? Like, that's not a signal of success, but somewhere deep down, it's like, yay, a seal of approval.
Yeah, I don't feel that.
Ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know if I think that. I'm just throwing that out there. So I think we've got time for one more, and then we have to wrap up over here. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you both so much for doing this tonight. Amina, I've been listening to Call Your Girlfriend for years, and one of the most memorable things you've ever said is that this is good is the day that you called the Harvard Business Review a feminist Bible. I laughed it off at first, but you said it years ago, and I think about it, no joke, every week because it's 100% true. So I'm wondering, are there any other resources that we are completely missing out on that are also sneaky feminist Bibles? Because for whatever reason, the connotation is that it's not for us,
Great
quote unquote,
question.
us being women, people who identify as women, women of color, etc.
I mean, that's amazing. It really is. I read so much Harvard Business Review. It's great. This is not an ad. You know, I think I think that it's really easy to think that like women who, you know, are feminists, I'm saying it again, are like hate men. I'm like, I actually don't hate men at all. Some of my best friends are men. Some of my best like brothers are men. Some of my best, like, I love it. I think that like one way that I have found that the men in my life have actually like very good to me is that they are fully transparent with me about what makes them successful. And so I always ask my dude friends how much money they're making because I'm like, I don't need to know what my girlfriends are making. I'm like, you're underpaid like me. That's not the data point I need. But it's the same thing, you know, like, so I say this only to point to resources, is that this is like truly, like, if you want to engage the men in your life, like, it's fine if they don't listen to your podcast, but they should be telling you what they're reading if they're reading. They should be telling you, like, you know, it's like, what's the thing that makes you what's the thing that like makes you tick? And I have found that like things like HBR, or I'm reading the Wall Street Journal now, but that's because I want to know how rich people live, and it's very wild. The Sunday magazine is incredible. Like, I'll give them that. But, you know, I'm saying all of this to say that I don't think that there's like a magic answer to that resource. I think that you should look to some of the people in your life who you think are doing things that you want to be doing and ask them, like, you know, it's like, what is your media diet? What is the thing that you know that I don't know? And I think that cuts across like so many things. It's like, ask your rich friends like who their accountant is. Ask your white friends about their secret money. Ask your dude friends about, you know, like what makes them feel that way. So all of this to say that I don't you know, I think that there's a lot of like leadership media that's made all the time, and some of it is honestly like very bad. It's very, very bad. But I think that like learning how the game is played is something that's like probably will always it'll like make you happy. Also, you don't need like 10 of those things. If you're reading HBR, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Thank you for that question. Amazing. Thank you so much. I basically started this podcast 3 years ago as an excuse to meet you one day. So it's like happened.
Dream bigger, please.
Thank you for being you. God, that's cheesy. And thank you everyone for coming and spending this really special evening together on a Monday night in the wind and the rain. Like, I am so grateful to everyone. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for having me.